Thank you. I'm Jayne Poolton-Turvey, the program manager for a project called Dieppe, Blue Beach, Every Man Remembered. My father was captured on Blue Beach during the Dieppe raid with the Royal Regiment of Canada. And I learned all about that end of the raid and that beach at Puy from my dad, and got very inspired to try and find a photo and a bio of each man that landed on the beach. So that's the Royal Regiment, 554 men, and the other regiments that landed with the Royals. So technically around 600 men.
And when did the project start, Every Man Remembered?
5 years ago, actually 5 years on November 11th, on Remembrance Day.
Oh.
Yeah, I had an idea that I started thinking about the fact that there was no place to find information on these men in one area. So in other words, in 20 years from now, if a descendant wanted to find some information on their grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great, they would have to do what I'm doing. And so I wanted to honor them because Dieppe was such a tragedy that these men were sort of pushed under the rug and not credited, or it's always come across as being a tragedy. So I wanted to honor them and remember them, not just a number, a statistic of how many were killed or how many were prisoners, but actually who they were.
Yeah. And if we can talk also about the book that you wrote with your father, because it's such an important book. How did you get started on that? And how long did that process take the both of you to write?
My dad was one of the soldiers who actually talked. It was usually something funny, humorous, quick little stories about the prison camp. He also talked about some of his buddies, even the ones that were killed, but it was always done sort of upbeat. As he got older, he started to unload a little bit of the sadness and the not the horrible things that happened, but just he started to want to talk more. My brother and sister and I encouraged him to write it down. It took us 5 years because he had to keep stopping due to how hard it was emotionally for him to tell this story. He would just get up, pack up his papers, and get up and leave. At the beginning, I thought, what did I do? Did I say something to make him mad? I learned later it was because he just couldn't deal with anymore. He had to take a break. The title is so appropriate. It's called Destined To Survive. And it's been a guide for me to read his words and look at things that he described. So it's been an incredible journey to advise families I'm coming in touch with that don't know the story. They can even get the book at their library. They don't have to purchase it, but they can learn the story from the mouth of a soldier who was there.
All the feelings that he has come out in this book, and you feel it too. And it's forever changed my perspective of what it was like to be a prisoner of war. It's wild. And the fact that he survived all that. It's wild, I mean, just like the transport from Dieppe to Poland was, just that journey to get to the camp, to even survive that alone. It's such a wonderfully written firsthand account, and we don't have a lot of firsthand accounts.
Absolutely.
That's great. So we met in 2016. Probably.
I think so. That winter, yeah.
That winter, yeah. And we worked together, and both Glenn and I are so grateful to have worked on that project with you. And you were able to bring 2 busloads of people who have direct connection to the Dieppe raid. And I can speak on behalf of Glenn and myself. We learned so much from that experience, and to connect the people that we knew in Dieppe with those families was such a phenomenal thing. So that's how we know each other. Dieppe was, for me and for a lot of Canadians, those pebbles on the beach is such a profound image. It's what got me started on the battlefield tours to bring it full circle. Like, oh, you're such an influential person in Canadian military history. You know, you've done so much.
I'll tell you, like, I had done 2 other tours to Dieppe, and when I arrived at the office to speak with you and Ian, I felt like I was in really good hands because I knew what I didn't like on the last tours. I wanted to find that school, and Ian knew exactly where it was.
Mm.
There were certain aspects to the trip that you guys took and made it happen. So without the input and your expertise, it would not have come together the way it did. And we actually have a list of people from that tour that want to come again if we are able to do this for the 80th, because they were just so blown away by our partnership and how it all came together to honor those soldiers.
Well, I mean, you and I discovered so much together.
Yeah.
You know, we discovered some really cool things, some eerie coincidences and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, lots of coincidences.
A lot of coincidences. So many of us think of you and the Every Man Remembered project on Remembrance Day, but what does it mean to you?
Well, as probably some other people that you've spoken to, Remembrance Day is not November 11th for me. It is, but it's actually every day of the year. I remember from the time I was a little girl going to the cenotaph with my dad and my mom, and my dad would parade on August 19th as well as November 11th. And it, like, this project has just opened up so much. I know these men personally from their stories. So Remembrance Day is super important because it kind of brings everything to focus on that particular day. But I think about all the stories, and not only just the soldiers who were killed, but the soldiers who came home broken, and their families who are still dealing with it now. It's very important for us to remember and not to let this ever go away. We need to do this in honor of these men and women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot believe that you're doing this every day, that you're researching these guys every day, every man, every day.
Yeah, every man, every day. That's my motto.
Who do you think needs our awareness or support right now?
Always the veterans. Always. They came home back in the day and didn't get the help they needed. And that's still happening. I recall my father having PTSD moments when I was a little girl, like in the middle of the night, having a nightmare and throwing himself on the floor, covering his head and saying, "Don't shoot." And I remember thinking there was a burglar in the house, and my mother calmly saying, "Jack, you're dreaming, get back into bed, you're safe, you're fine." And they were never given any help until it was too late. They were, in their late 80s, I think. My father finally got the okay to go and see a shrink, and he was in his 80s. And this woman just thought she'd hit the gold mine with this man who had all this baggage. There's so many veterans nowadays that are coming home and they're on the streets and they're not getting that help. And I can't believe that in our day and age in 2020 that still is an issue. So I believe that we need to support the various organizations, the legions, and there's others to support those veterans, because we're sending them over there and they come home and they're broken and they need to be cared for.
And what will you be doing on Remembrance Day this year? And can you tell us about everything you've got going on beforehand, like all the online events that you've got going on?
Absolutely. I work at the Aurelia Public Library part-time. And the greatest thing ever was when I got permission to put together a remembrance event in 2014. And it has grown every year. Last year, we had 800 students come through and about 1,000 general public. over a 3-day period. It's almost like an interactive event now. However, this year we had to change it up. Aurelia has some incredible stories connected to World War I. So we have 3 videos telling those stories. And then we have a video about World War II and some of the soldiers that are connected to Aurelia, but mostly the stories like, you know, D-Day and Dieppe. And then one of our military collectors, who also is a program manager on the project, he has a lot of expertise in artifacts. So he's going to describe the Lee Enfield, the Bren gun. One of the interactive events I created, because the teachers kept asking for more and more interactive, I took my father and my grandfather's World War II soldiers paybook. So my grandfather was in the Veterans Guards in World War II, so his paybook was in really good shape. So I scanned the cover and I created a paybook for each student. And inside are questions that go with the exhibits. And I dropped off 650 paybooks at several schools in the area so that each student will get their own paybook.
Oh my gosh.
And because they love them, they take them home and they show them off, and we tell them the significance of the paybooks. And it's been a direct interactive link for these students to get to know the stories.
That's phenomenal. That's awesome. And this is all through the Aurelia Library?
Yes. And luckily I have a CEO that supports it 100%.
Oh, that's
We did
fantastic.
win a provincial library award for it a couple of years ago.
No way.
We did. But it's so meaningful, because I always say to these students, you know, I ask them if they have a connection to military. Some of them, they have a father or mother that's in the military right now.
Oh, wow.
But many of them don't have any connection. So I say to them, how do you remember if you have nothing to remember? So I give them something to remember. I give them the stories. I show them photos of these people from the local area, and they go away and they know the stories. So it's a win-win. I think we partnered with 15 different groups, like museums and individuals, and people were bringing stuff out that's been in their lockers or basements. One guy in particular grew up in London, England during the Battle of the Blitz, and he had all these planes that he's collected over the years and wanted to show them. So this year, having to pare that back has been a real challenge.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and we had to keep it going. We can't just drop it. It's too important.
Right on. Oh, well, thank you so much for those answers. And thank you so much for all you do always. And thank you for being so active, because you really impress upon your own Facebook page, but the community Facebook page, online, the newsletter that comes out is full of so much more information, not just what events you've got coming up, but like personal individual stories, which I guess is what your project's all about. But
Right.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.